The movie opens in a party. Brilliant inventor and scientist Seth Brundle is talking to journalist Veronica. He tells her he has invented something this is going to change the world. She then asks him what it is, but he tells her he can only show her and invites her to come to his lab apartment. Seth is a little awkward and weird, but she agrees to go to his lab. Once they get there, he shows her his latest invention that he calls the telepod. The telepod is a teleportation machine that disintegrates matter, transmitted across space, and then reintegrated into another telepod. Veronica obviously doesn't believe him, so he asks her to give him something she owns. She then takes off and gives him her stockings, and he puts it into the machine. Then 10 seconds later, the stockings teleport from one telepod to another. Veronica is shocked to see this, and she starts her tape recorder and starts asking him questions about the machine and what it means for humanity. Seth starts explaining, but he sees that she is recording him. He then asks her to not release this, but she reminds him she is a journalist and that she is going to release it to the public. The next morning, Veronica plays her tape to her boss and ex-boyfriend Stathis, but he starts laughing and tells her Seth is just a scammer trying to get a story. She then tries to tell him she saw it with her own eyes, but they get interrupted by Seth, who has come to the magazine company to talk to her. Stathis then leaves the room laughing, and Seth invites Veronica to lunch. While eating, he explains that the machine is not yet ready, and her revealing it would just cause problems. He tells her the machine still can't transport living things, and offers to give her exclusive access to his lab so she can track his progress and finally publish her findings when the machine fully works. He tells her she can get a book deal with this instead of one small article, and she gets tempted by the offer and agrees. In the coming days, Veronica spends much of her time with Seth at his lab. They test experiments together and start to get closer and closer to each other. One day, after making some adjustments, Seth decides to test the machine with a live baboon. He puts the baboon on the first machine and starts the teleportation. The baboon is successfully teleported from the first machine, but when he opens the next machine, he finds the baboon dead with its flesh inside out. With another unsuccessful test, Seth is slumped. Veronica comforts him, which leads to them kissing each other and sleeping together. After making love, Seth is hit with another idea. He then cuts a steak in two and puts one of it on the teleporter. He then cooks the teleported and the non-teleported steak separately and gives it for Veronica to test. She immediately differentiates the two and says the teleported tasted like something synthetic. From this result, Seth figures out that the computer is interpreting the meat differently, and if he can fix that, the teleportation would work. The next day, Veronica is out shopping new cloths for Seth. She then runs into Stathis, who has actually been following her. Stathis is a very jealous ex, and he accuses Veronica of not doing her job and just hanging out with Seth just to sleep with him. But she tells him she can do whatever she wants and tells him to F off. Veronica returns to Seth's apartment as he is getting ready to do his next test. He believes he has fixed the computer, so he puts another baboon in the telepod and starts it. A few seconds later, he opens the second telepod and the baboon comes out unharmed. Both are overjoyed and they discuss what they're going to do. Seth says he first needs to send the baboon to a lab to check if there is anything wrong with him, and then he can go in the telepod himself and she can record this amazing discovery. The baboon test will take weeks to be completed, so they start planning a vacation, but Veronica finds a letter sent from Stathis, and when she opens it, she finds a magazine cover about Seth. She then stops the celebration early and goes to Stathis's office so she can stop him from publishing. She convinces him she has a bigger story and manages to stop him from prematurely publishing it. Meanwhile, in Seth's lab, he celebrates his success alone. He then gets drunk and starts thinking the reason Veronica went to her office was to hook up with Stathis. He then gets angry and decides to teleport himself. He gets naked and gets into the first telepod, but without him seeing a fly also enters his telepod. He then gets teleported to the next telepod successfully, but we don't see the fly. Veronica comes back shorty, and he tells her what he did. They then reconcile and go to sleep, but later that night he gets awakened by a noise of a fly. He then grabs the fly with superhuman reflex speed. He then gets up from his bed and starts doing a workout. He has just become faster, stronger, and more flexible. Seth thinks when the telepod teleported him, it also unlocked his potential, but we see a thick black hair growing from his back. In the next few days, we see Seth become more and more erratic. He starts craving sugar. He talks very fast. He can't sit in one place for a long time. He also stops showering and starts smelling bad. Veronica starts worrying about him and tells him to go see a doctor, but he accuses her of being jealous of him. He then offers to also put her in the telepod, but she refuses, so he says he's going to get another person and leaves. He arrives at a local bar and meets with a woman named Tawny. He starts talking to her, but another guy interrupts him and tells him to back off. Seth then bets $100 that he can beat the man on arm wrestling, and the man agrees to do it. Seth then not only wins the arm wrestling, but he breaks the guy's arm in the process. He then takes Tawny to his home, and they have sex. The next morning, Veronica returns to the lab and finds the two together. Tawny then leaves awkwardly. Then Veronica confronts Seth about the changes she has seen in him. Not only is his back growing more thick hairs, but his face is breaking out in blisters and his body is getting soft. She then informs him that she had some of his back hairs analyzed and that the result indicated that it is most likely an insect hair. Seth refuses to believe anything is wrong with him, and he kicks Veronica out of his lab and tells her to never come back. Later that day, Seth is looking at himself in the mirror. He notices he has been looking very bad. He then looks at his hands and sees his fingernails are starting to fall off. He then presses his hand and a white fluid starts coming out of his fingers. He concludes something must have gone wrong when he went through the telepods, so he checks the record of his teleportation, and his computer tells him that there was a secondary element in the pod with him. After more digging, he figures out it was a housefly. He then asks the computer what happened to the fly, and it tells him that his and the fly's genes have been spliced together into one. A month later, Seth calls Veronica and asks her to come to his lab. When she arrives, she finds Seth deteriorated. His face has started growing the fly's hair. He wears a glove so he doesn't bite off his very soft fingers, and he can't walk properly, so he uses a cane. He tells her he doesn't know if his disease is transmittable and begs her to help him. Veronica feels sorry for him and hugs him, but she has no idea on how to help him. He tells her he can't chew food, so he eats by vomiting corrosive enzymes onto his food and sucking up the dissolved remains. She then sees one of his ears falling out of his face. Veronica then tells him they need to go to a doctor, but he tells her he doesn't want to be used as a lab rat and asks her to find another way. Veronica goes to Stathis and tells him about Seth's condition, and he asks her to film Seth so they could learn more about his condition. She then goes back to Seth's lab, and she finds him crawling on the ceiling and the walls. He tells her he has figured out what is happening to him and reveals to her that he is trying to be a human fly hybrid he calls Brundle fly. He asks Veronica to document his evolution, and she records a video of Seth explaining how he eats like a fly. She brings the tape to Stathis and shows him, and he is horrified by what he sees, but he still continues to look for ways to help Seth. But one day, a shocking news arrives when Veronica reveals she is pregnant with Seth's child. That night, Veronica dreams of giving birth to a giant fly, which freaks her out, and she starts contemplating aborting the fetus. Stathis advises her to first talk to Seth before doing anything, so she goes to Seth's lab to visit him. Seth has deteriorated even further now. He no longer wears clothes and his skin doesn't look like a human one. Most of his body parts have fallen off his body and he barely resembles his old self. Veronica is speechless, and even before she could tell him anything, he warns her to not come again and reveals to her that the fly in him is taking over and that he will harm her next time. Veronica rushes out before telling him she is pregnant. Stathis was waiting for her outside and asks how it went, but she just asks him to take her to an abortion doctor right now. Seth overhears them talking and he follows them to the hospital. Stathis and Veronica find one doctor in the middle of the night who agrees to do the abortion, but when he goes out to get his materials, Seth breaks in her room and kidnaps her. He takes her to a top of a building and begs her to not abort the baby, but she tells him that she doesn't know what is growing inside her and tells him she is frightened. Stathis grabs his shotgun and goes to Seth's lab. He assumes he will bring Veronica back here, so he gets ready to take him out, but Seth is actually the one that ambushes him as he jumps from the ceiling and takes him to the ground. Stathis then tries to point his shotgun and shoot Seth, but Seth uses his special digestive enzyme to melt down Stathis's left hand. He then does the same to one of his legs, but when he goes to vomit on his face and eat him, Veronica shouts stop and begs him to stop. Seth then leaves Stathis alone and grabs Veronia. He then tells her he has found a way for him to become away. He explains if he is combined with 2 other pure humans, then he can overcome the fly. But to make this happen, Seth has to go into one telepod, then Veronica in another one. Then the computer will infuse hers, Seth's and the fetus's gene, and combine them to a single human. Veronica obviously refuses, not wanting to be observed by Seth and become one with him. But Seth forces her and starts pulling her to the telepod. She tries to escape by taking off his jaw, but that just makes the fly side of him come out even more as his whole skin starts falling off and the fly part becomes fully visible. He then pushes her into the telepod and closes it on her. He then gets into his, and the timer starts for the teleportation machine. But as the countdown ticks away, Stathis crawls to his shotgun and he shoots Veronica's cable, which disconnects her telepod from the others. Seth tries to get out of his telepod to start the machine again, but it was too late and he gets teleported by himself. He then starts crawling out of the next telepod and Veronica runs to the shotgun and grabs him. As he crawls close to her, Veronica doesn't have the guts to shoot him, but Seth grabs the shotgun and guides it to his head, indicating to her to shoot him. This gives Veronica the courage and she pulls the trigger, killing Seth. And with that, the movie ends. What did you think about the ending? Let us know in the comments.